Okay, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Babu khiyar al-shart. So we started that, didn't we?
Yeah, we did the bit about 3 days. We talked about Sahabi.
Alright, so Babu khiyar al-shart. So khiyar al-shart is basically a form of like guarantee. Yeah. So basically you can test the item that you want to buy. You can go and test it. Yeah, you buy a car, you buy a house, you buy anything, then what happens is you might go home and you find out that this wasn't the thing that you wanted. So because this is a common thing, the Prophet ﷺ, he permitted the concept of khiyar al-shart. So the first question that comes is this: is khiyar al-shart, i.e., let's say for example Shakil, he buys something from Ikram, he buys his bag. So Shakil doesn't know if this bag is going to be appropriate for him, because will his laptop fit in there? Will his books fit in there? Will his stuff fit in there? So he wants to go home and he wants to try it out, right? And on the other hand, Ikram, obviously, he wants to sell it. So what happens now? So because there needs to be customer confidence between a seller and between the buyer, then the Sharia has stipulated the concept of, or has permitted the concept of, khiyar al-shart. So Shakil will say this: I as the customer would like to have khiyar al-shart. And he says fine. And khiyar al-shart simply would be, he has a limited number of days. Within those limited number of days, he has to either confirm the purchase or return it. Yeah. Make sense? So if he confirms it, it's his, money gets transferred, and that's it. If he says I don't want it, it means if he's given money, he gets the money back, gives the item back, just like we have today's concept of 28-day money back guarantee. Yeah, same kind of concept that looks like. That's the first though. Khiyar al-shart jaizun fil bay'. Khiyar al-shart is jaiz when it comes to transaction. Number two, who is it jaiz for? So it's jaiz for both the bayi' and the mushtari. We talked about the mushtari, the buyer. The buyer, he takes out khiyar al-shart. Yeah, why does he take out khiyar al-shart for? Because he obviously wants to know if his books are going to fit in the bag. And he'll only know that if he goes, takes it home. Why would the buyer want to take out khiyar al-shart? Yeah, why would the buyer want to take out khiyar al-shart? So this would happen, let's say for example, you have a car. You don't know if you want to sell your car now. And let's say you're waiting for, you to speak to your mechanic or to someone. But at the moment, someone's come to purchase the car from you. So you say to them, right, look, I'll sell you my car, but give me a couple of days. Within those couple of days, if I want it back, then I'll give you money back. So the other way, the shopkeeper can also ask for a khiyar as well.
Even if the item's been given?
Even the item's been given.
Do you have to give the item, or can you
Up to you.
say in a couple of days I'll confirm?
Yeah, that's fine as well.
Is that the same time limit? Imam Hanifa says 3 days.
Yeah, so that's the third thing. What's the time duration of this? Because obviously there has to be some time duration. So yes, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he stipulates that it can only last for 3 days, 72 hours. Maximum you can have is 72 hours. And that's because the hadith explicitly states 72 hours. Yeah, 3 days. That's what the hadith says.
That's both ways.
Huh?
Both ways, so whether it's buyer or the...
Yeah.
So
if he asks for 3 days or if he asks for 3 days.
So us to take advantage of these.
Okay, everyone understand that? So look, lahuma al-khiyar, for them too there is khiyar, thalathatu ayyam, 3 days, fama dunaha, and anything less than that. So fama dunaha simply means, so what is less than that? Meaning 3 or less, like we say. 3 or less. Okay. وَلَا يَجُوزُ أَكْثَرُ مِنْ ذَلِكَ. More than 3 days, more than 72 hours is not allowed in the Abi Hanifa rahimahullah, according to Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. He says, more than that is not allowed. What do the Sahibain say? The Sahibain, they don't agree with Imam Abu Hanifa on this point. They say you're actually allowed any time period so long as both parties mutually agree on a time. And their reason for this is because if you look at the lives of the Sahaba, Ibn Umar, he used to take a khiyar for a period more than 3 days, sometimes up to a month or two. And I mean, if you think about it, they're saying this, not everything can be tested within 3 days. There's certain things that you need more time to test. Like for example, like a car, you might need to take it on the motorway, you might need to, take it for a few rounds to realize if it's the car for you. Yeah, so this is why they say that there's no maximum period, as long as both parties agree. Everyone understand that? So he says, وقال أبو يوسف ومحمد رحمه الله يجوز إذا سمى, it is permissible when he, meaning either of the two parties, stipulate مدة معلومة, a known period. So as long as they mention a known period, what happens? Then it's allowed. Now, although the main position that was taken in history was Imam Abu Hanifa's position, later on in the Ottoman Empire, they actually took Imam Sahibain's position because of the radical change in the way people used to do businesses. Businesses changed from tribal, small little local businesses to international global businesses. So now, if you buy, for example, like a ship, if you got a business and you make ships for people, big ships, you can't test a ship in 3 days. Probably take you 3 days to switch it on. Yeah, so how can you test it within 3 days? Doesn't make sense. So this is why their position has been taken by the late Hanafis. That's why when you ask the question about 28 days, yeah, it's fine. Those kind of things are fine.
Ustad, could you just translate this part after the Sahibain? Yajuzu is some.
Yajuzu, it is permissible, meaning more than 3 days is permissible. إذا سمى, when he stipulates, when he states.
So one party states, that's what I'm saying.
Samma, yes, samma means to state, to name. Samma yusammi tasmiyatan. Muddatan ma'lumatan, a fixed, a known period. Okay, everyone understand it? Next masla now, fourth masla. Look, you know this concept of taking the khiyar, like we said, the mushtari can take the khiyar, shakil can take the khiyar, or ikram can take the khiyar, yeah? So let's start with ikram taking the khiyar. Ikram sells his bag to shakil. Now ikram's in two minds of whether he should sell his bag or not, because he's thinking to himself, if I can't find another bag, I'm going to still need this bag. Right? So he goes and sells it to him. So let's say, because these texts are generally based on Imam Hanifa's positions, so let's stick with Imam Hanifa's position of 3 days. So he's got 72 hours to make up his mind. So he's given his bag to him, Shakil has given the money over to him. Now within 72 hours, Shakil is waiting for phone call or whatever to tell him that he wants it or not. So now here comes the legal issue behind this now. So the legal issue is this: within those 3 days, has the ownership of the bag transferred into the ownership of the consumer, mushtari, or not?
Have they paid when they've decided?
Yeah, they paid. Money's been handed over. So, but technically, has he become the owner or not? Is this like, what kind of, this 3 day period, limbo kind of period, what is it? Who is the owner? Do you understand that? Does that make sense? That's one masala. The second masala, what if the mushtari takes khiyar? Right, the mushtari, which is shakil, he takes khiyar, meaning he's giving the money, but then he's in two minds of whether he wants it or not. So within 3 days, he's going to decide whether or not this bag is for him. So within these 3 days, if he was to take the khiyar, would we consider the item to have, the money to have transferred, and he has become the owner of that money now? And that bag has become his. How does it work? Everyone understand that? The reason we need to know this is because whenever a transaction happens, there has to be transfer of ownership. And one person cannot own two things at the same time. That's unfair, that is. Because it has to be fair trade. So because of this, these questions are raised. So for example, like now, if we don't know the ruling of this, we won't know the ruling. Let's say the bag got damaged. Within those 3 days, a thief came, stole the bag. Who's responsible for that bag now? Does that make sense? Or for example, like let's say the money gets taken or whatever. So anything could happen. So this is why we need to know everything, the legalities of everything. Does that make sense? Okay. Now look at this now. Before we actually go into this, you need to understand something. Every single item which is permissible to be sold Islamically has two prices. One is the market price, yeah, the market value, and one is the agreed upon value between the buyer and seller. Every time we go into a shop and we buy a chocolate bar, or we buy a drink, or we buy a loaf of bread, are we buying it according to the market price, or are we buying it according to the agreed price between us and the seller? Agreed. This is called the thaman. You call this thaman. Yeah, so whatever price tag you find in Tesco and Asda on an item, you call that thaman. You picking that up and taking it to the counter and paying for it, you agreed to that price, even though you know the real price of that is lower. Yeah, the market price is called the qima. Market price is called the qima. Yeah, just like, you put in samosas. Yeah, qima. It's called the qima. Everyone understand that? Why do we need to know this for? Let me give you an example. If I walk into a shop and I pick up a glass bottle of milk, and a glass bottle of milk says one glass bottle of milk is for 50 pence, and it slipped out of my hand and smashed on the floor, do I have to pay the 50 pence, or do I have to pay the market value of that milk? Market value. Why?
That's the loss that's suffered by.
Because I haven't agreed I'm going to pay this.
Oh, okay.
Just because I picked it up, I haven't agreed. I have to agree when I go to him and I hand over the money. That's when I've agreed. If I handed over the money and then I dropped it, right, then that's my fault. Yeah. Or if I say to him, I'm buying this, and then it fell out my hand, now I've got to pay the 50 pence. Does that make sense? Yeah. So any damage you cause to anyone's property, right, if it's not like an agreed sort of mutual contract, you have to pay the market value of that thing. Now, usually market value is much less than the agreed upon value. Everyone understand that? So look at this now. Ikram takes, let's say, okay, let's do Shakil side. Ikram side. Ikram takes the khiyar. Yeah, Ikram, he sells the bag. Now, when Ikram sells that bag, out of the two, which one of them is happy for his possession to go into the ownership of the other person? No, he's not. Shakil's happy, isn't he? Why?
He's buying.
No, because he hasn't taken the khiyar.
Yeah.
The guy who takes the khiyar, he's in two minds, isn't he?
Okay.
So he's not sure if he wants his thing to be transferred ownership. Shakil's happy. If he's taken the ownership, Ikram's taken the ownership, the khiyar, it means he doesn't really want it to leave his ownership. So this is why it doesn't leave his ownership. Within those 3 days, before he's made up his mind, it's still his legally. Does that make sense? Yeah. So because he hasn't left his ownership, the money in that case is still with him. Because one person can't own two things.
What happens if they both, as you say, agree, stipulate the fruit?
Then no, it doesn't transfer, anyone transfer.
Although they're handing the money over.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's just like you give someone some money to keep for a week and then take it back off them as a trust. It's treated as a trust.
So ownership basically,
Yeah, it remains as it was. Everyone got that? So, look at this.
But so in that situation, would the normal practice be to pay or not to pay?
That's up to you two.
You can agree.
Yeah, you can agree that. Yeah, payment is something you can pay on the spot or you can pay delayed payment. It's totally fine. Yeah, so khiyarul bayi, the khiyar of ikram, yamna'u, prevents the transferring of the mabi, the commodity, min milki. In other words, in simple terms, if the buyer takes khiyar he still remains the owner of the item. It doesn't transfer to the consumer. That's what it means. The wording is a bit difficult. Yamna, it stops, prevents the commodity leaving his ownership. Meaning, he's still the owner. فَإِنْ قَبَضَهُ الْمُشْتَرِي, if the mushtari takes possession of it. Yeah, so mushtari has taken the bag. Remember, he's given in the bag. He's got 3 days with the bag. Because Ikram still making up his mind whether he wants it or not. فَحَلَكَ بِيَدِهِ, and the bag got destroyed. Maybe, he left the bag outside one day, he drove off and someone's gone take it now. That means in his possession, it's gone. Not ownership. Difference between possession and ownership. What happens? What does he have to pay? Dam fi muddatil khiyar, within the same 2 hours, within the period of daminahu bil qima. He has to pay compensation of what? Market value. Not the
Agreed.
because it hasn't been agreed yet. He's still in 2 minds. You understand? Okay, now flip it the other way around now.
How do you get the market value, sir?
So in them days it was easy, in today's days it's difficult. So in them days it would simply be, people would roughly know in the markets how much this item would cost. Yeah. Roughly how much would it cost? There's certain things in our time today, we know how much roughly it costs.
So, for example, a car in today's time, could you just look at like Parker's?
Yeah, so possibly. Just like, when you kind of, these companies that want to sell your car or something, you just need to put your registration on plane. They'll give you maybe you can use that. But obviously, if it was a legal system today, then what would happen is everything would have a kind of a value, or you contact an expert, and the expert would tell you.
That's what you do in court here. So if you damage something and you need to get the market value of it, you either get an expert valuer to express an opinion, or if there's sort of guides or failing that, there's a maxim that the market price, if you can't establish it, it's the price on the sticker basically. In
Okay.
the absence of anything, if you can't establish a price, then the price that it's being sold at is deemed to be the market price. That's what people are willing to pay.
Okay.
That's not necessarily that, but
Yeah.
if you can't figure it out,
Alright.
then that's
So in UK law as well, if you drop something in the shop, then you only have to pay the market value. You don't have to pay.
technically, yeah.
Okay, next masla. What if Shakil takes the khiyar? So Shakil's having doubts about whether he should part with his money or not. So now in this there's an ikhtilaf now. Here there's an ikhtilaf. Who is happy for their item to transfer ownership? He's happy, isn't it? So as soon as he agreed to this transaction, that bag's ownership has transferred into Shakil's ownership. What's going to happen to the money? Sahibain say, because he's taken the bag's ownership, he can't have the money, can he? So where does he go?
No.
So within these 3 days, like an interim period, it goes into his ownership. But if obviously Shakil doesn't want the bag, the money will go back now. Yeah, just like online, when you buy something and then you cancel it, and then they'll refund your money. It'll be like a refund. Imam Hanifa says no. Imam Hanifa says, look, Shakil is not happy for his money to go. So just like before, when Ikram wasn't happy for his bag to go, we said it doesn't transfer ownership. So ownership can't transfer. But the problem is, the money can't stay with Shakil because you'd have unfair trade. One person has ownership of 2 things. That's like a legal loophole. So this is why he says that this will remain in thin air. Just for those 3 days, none of them are the owners.
Just the owner of the money, not the bag.
Yeah, the money. Because technically, if something happens to money, you can always reimburse money. Money, according to Islamic law, money is not considered to be something which is specified. So, for example, like I told you, if you go to the shop and you buy something for £5, and you say, I'm going to give you £5, and you wave £5 in front of them, you don't have to give that £5. You can give 5 coins, you can give 10 50s, you can give 20, or etc. Yeah? But when if you sell an item, like a book, I'm going to sell you this, you have to sell that. You can't replace it with another one. Does that make sense? Because Islamically, money is not considered to be... Money is actually something, technically, in this country, is different. Because the way the economy is set up. Money is something which people want. But classically, money was not considered something people wanted. Money was just a mean to get what you want. But nowadays, people are using money to make money, which is riba, interest, usury. That's why the whole system is all messed up. But you're supposed to use money originally as a means to get what you want.
So Ustad, although the ownership doesn't change,
Yeah.
if the buyer as seller, if he wants to kind of get the money as a security, can he still do that? Can he still pay him the money?
No, but, yeah, he can pay the money. He
Yeah,
can
but
take possession of it.
Yeah.
Possession is fine. Nothing wrong with possession. The problem is legalities of it, the ownership.
Was Abu Hanifa influenced by the fact that it was limited to 3 days? So the period of uncertainty is small.
Yeah.
Because if you apply Imam Abu Hanifa this masala to the unlimited period, you could have 2 months, 3 months, 6 months
Yeah.
of no one owning a particular item.
Yeah.
Whereas under Imam Abu Hanifa's rules, it's only limited
Yeah.
to 3 days. So
That's
you shouldn't mix and match the two.
Possibly, that's possibly. Why are you saying that? Because Imam Hanifa was strict on this and said
Yeah.
just 3 days.
So it's a limited period of
Yeah.
uncertainty.
So within those 3 days, usually, I mean, if you
Not
think
much
about it, in them
happened.
days, the kind of transactions that would take place wasn't in the billions or in the millions.
Mm.
Yeah, it'd just be like maybe hundreds, maybe maximum like very rare thousands. They do a transaction. Yeah, so this is why you got to look into how businesses were conducted in the olden days, and in today's times how they're conducted. This is why Imam Sahibain's opinion makes more sense in today's time.
Because if you did that for a longer period, then it has implications for zakat and things
Yeah,
like that,
exactly.
doesn't it?
There's also lots of other implications.
Mm.
Yeah, so everyone understand that? So if Shakil takes out the khiyar, the guy with the money, the guy with the cash, right? Technically, Imam Hanifa says it does not go to the other side. It actually stays in midair, i.e., no one is the owner for those 3 days. Now, based on this, right? Based on this, the Hanafis have like a whole list of masail. Yeah, it's about 12 masail or so, where there's ikhtilaf between Imam Hanifa and Sahibain. If this was to happen, what would happen? If this was to happen, what would happen? Based on Imam Hanifa's conclusion, the answer will be this. Yeah, so look at this. Khiyar al-mushtari la yamna. The khiyar of the mushtari does not stop khuruj al-mabi, the commodity, from leaving the ownership of the seller, meaning the bag, because he's happy, he hasn't taken it, it will transfer. Illa anna al-mushtari, however, the mushtari la yamlikuhu does not own, and al-mushtari la yamlikuhu does not own it. In the Abi Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, wa qala Abu Yusuf wa Muhammad rahimahullah, Imam Abu Yusuf and Muhammad say no, he does own it. Right? So, فَإِنْ halaka, what if it gets destroyed within these 3 days? بِيَدِهِ halaka بِالثَّمَنِ. According to Sahibain, if the bag got destroyed in Shakil's possession, what happens?
You pay the price.
The price, because he was happy to
sell at that
yeah,
price.
have that time. Imam Hanifa says no, you pay qima. So that's one of the fruits of the ikhtilaf. And there's other fruit as well in the advanced books. Everyone got that? Okay. Right. What if a fault was to come into it? Yeah. So let's say, for example, Shakil's got the bag for a few days, and he's left it outside. It's rained and it's damaged the color of the bag now. It wasn't the same as it was when he took it. So what happens now? How much does he have to pay? So again, according to Sahibain, depending on the damage, if it's damage which is cause a big problem, then he'll have to pay thaman. And if it's damage less than that, then he pays whatever, the takes the original price, takes the damage price, and reimburses him with whatever. And if it's Imam Hanifa's position, if you take that, then he has to only give the qima. So كذلك إن دخله عيب. Okay. Next masala. This is the 5th masala. So the person who takes the khiyar, yeah. So Ikram takes the khiyar. Within the 3 days, he has the right to let the transaction go through, which is known as ijaza, yujizu, and he has the right to nullify it. And likewise, if Shakil takes the the transaction, the khiyar, he has the right within 3 days to let it go through, or he can reject it. Now, if he lets it go through, so if Ikram sells the bag, and then now he decides, you know what, chalo, let him take it. Does he have to contact him and tell him that he's agreed?
If it's more than 3 days.
Yeah, so the default is that no, he doesn't have to tell him. Yeah, he doesn't have to tell him that he's agreed. So he assumes by default, if he doesn't get the news within 3 days, he assumes that it's gone through. So after 3 days, if he wanted to go and sell it to someone else, he can sell it. Legally, he won't be held responsible for that.
That's if the seller took the khiyar.
Whoever takes the khiyar.
Oh, okay.
Whoever, so he, in this case, he took the khiyar, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he wants to go through. Other way around, if Shakil took the khiyar, yeah, within those 3 days, if no news came, Ikram can take that money and he can buy whatever he wants with that money.
So it's the person who's taking the khiyar, it's the opposite person
Yeah.
who just by default takes up with it.
Yeah. But if he's not happy with it, if he doesn't want it to go through, cancels it, then he must contact him within 3 days. Otherwise, what happens?
The default.
By default, yeah, it's gone through. You understand that? So look at this. وَمَنْ شُرِطَ لَهُ الْخِيَارِ, whoever has taken the shart of khiyar, فَلَهُ, then he has the right and يفسخ, to do fasakh, في مدة الخيار, within the period of khiyar, which is how much period is that? 3 days. وَلَهُ أَنْ يُجِيزَهُ, and he also has the right to allow it to go through. فَإِنْ أَجَازَهُ, if he permits it, بِغَيْرِ حَضَرَةِ صَاحِبِهِ, without the presence of its true owner, jaza, what happens? It's permissible. Contract goes through. وَإِنْ فَسَخَ, but if he was to nullify it, لَمْ يَجُزْ. What's not permissible? That nullification is not permissible except أن يكون الآخر حاضر. So that nullification will not be considered valid in the courts. Yeah, so let's say 2 weeks later, Shakil sees Ikram and says, how's the bag? He goes, no, I don't want it. I gave it back. And Shakil says, what do you mean? What do you mean I've gone and taken that bag and I've gone and sold it to someone else? He goes, no, I didn't want you to sell it. So they both go to court now. So when the judge will summon both of them, who is he going to listen to? Whose proof is going to be accepted? He would have to provide proof that news of his nullification of the contract reached him within 3 days. If he can't provide proof, al-bayyinatu al-mudda'i, then what happens? Then the other person swears an oath. Yeah, you swear an oath that within 3 days you didn't get news of it. It's fine. You won the
So
case.
if he, for example, sends the news but he doesn't get it, then what
So he has to make sure that he gets the news.
Oh, okay.
He can't just say like to his cousin on the street, tell Shakil, yeah, I don't want the bag. But he has to make sure that he gets it. It's a legal thing. This is money.
Yeah. So if he like sends an email and he doesn't check it, then it's his
Yeah. So he has to make sure that it gets to him somehow. The news does,
Okay.
and that will not be considered. Okay. إلا أن يكون الآخر حاضر. Same opposite around. Shakil didn't want the bag, and then 2 weeks later he met Ikram, and Ikram says, "How's the bag?" He goes, "I don't want it. I left the bag with your cousin, yeah." He goes, "But I didn't know about it." He goes, "Oh, sorry about that, but I left it there." So if he goes to court, the judge will ask him, "What's the proof that he found out about it?" If you can't provide proof, you just make a swear an oath, and he wins the case. Everyone understand that? Okay, next. What if this happens now? This can, remember, you got to think of all the possibilities now. Ikram takes the khiyar, or let's say Shakil takes the khiyar. The guy who's taken the khiyar dies within 3 days. Yeah, because that can happen. If let's say this is an Islamic system, and there's 1,000 people who have taken khiyar, what's the likelihood of one of them dying within 3 days? There's a high chance of it. Yeah, in the world, if there's one person that dies every minute, yeah, or is it every second, then that obviously means that there must be high chance of something happening. So there is legalities behind it. So in other words, if let's say Ikram dies now in these 3 days, what's going to happen? Has the transaction gone through, or has it not gone through?
So he took the khiyar over.
Yeah, he's taken the khiyar,
Yeah. And he died.
and he's died, and second day he's died.
It's gone through.
Khiyar becomes invalid.
Why? What was the rule for khiyar? The rule was that he has to either confirm it or reject it. If he's dead, he can't confirm, nor can he reject. So by default, automatically the contract becomes nullified.
The right of the
Not the
khiyar
contract,
does-
the khiyar becomes nullified.
the right of khiyar doesn't pass on to his heirs.
No, right,
It
right,
says no.
rights. This is a rule in fiqh. Rights cannot pass on. Yeah, rights not be passed on. So this is like a kind of a difficult one with today's times. Where in today's times you can have a right and that right can be sold on to someone else. It can be transferred ownership of rights. Islamically, technically rights cannot be sold. But unless they become a commodity. If a right becomes a commodity itself, like nowadays, franchises and certain names of certain things, these can become commodities now. So they can be sold on. But this issue, it's not a per se commodity. So this is why he says, إِذَا مَاتَ مَنْ لَهُ الْخِيَارِ, the person who's taken khiyar, if he dies, what happens? بَطَلَ خِيَارُهُ. If his khiyar becomes nullified, what happens to the contract?
Void.
No, it goes through.
Contract was no the khiyar
Yeah.
is void.
Contract goes through and khiyar nullified. Because the khiyar was the thing that was stopping the contract from going through. It was stopping it from going through. So once you remove the khiyar out of the equation, the contract goes through. So بَطَلَ خِيَارُهُ وَلَمْ يَنْتَقِلْ لَوَرْثَتِهِ, and it does not transfer to the heirs. Heirs do not have the right to say, because this was to do with his opinion, his personal experience. So you can't transfer people's personal experiences to someone else.
So actually, what in practical terms that means death means that it becomes an absolute contract at that
That's
stage.
it. Goes through.
Right.
It's like him saying,
You've lost your option, basically.
it's like him not having the khiyar from the beginning.
Yeah.
That's what it was like.
So the other person benefits from his death in the sense that it becomes final.
And if, for example, like you haven't given the money, his heirs would go to court and would demand that you give money, because now it's assumed the contract's gone through,
Yeah.
so you'd have to pay.
But the heirs have the right to demand the.
Yeah,
payment.
because obviously that's their inheritance now, isn't
Yeah.
it? So they have that right. Okay, everyone understand that? Okay, next thing now. Now look at this. This has nothing to do with khiyar, okay? This is like one of those random maslas which it seems as though they put it in the wrong chapter. But because this next chapter is to do, khiyar ru'ya, another type of khiyar al-aib, it kind of fits in with that. So what happens is, this is to do with like a certain type of well, let me explain it before we go into it. When you buy something, like if Shakil wants to buy that bag, why does he buy that bag for? Huh? No, what's the reason? Like, what did you see in that bag? Maybe he bought that bag because he needs a laptop bag, and he thought to himself, that can fit my laptop. Maybe he bought that bag because for work, part of the uniform, he needs a bag, look professional.
He has a use for it.
There has to be something he's looking for, isn't it? When you buy a laptop, what do you look for?
Certain qualities.
Yeah, certain specs, don't you? Certain things you look for. Clothing you buy, you look for certain styles, designs. Okay, so these little like extra kind of features that you have in things, they don't have a value intrinsically. So they don't have an inherent value unless the buyer and seller give these little things a value. For example, like this bag has got a strap there. Does that strap have a value? Did they agree upon a value for that strap? No, any. He's just paying, let's say, £100 for that bag. He's just paying for the whole bag. Not the black colour has nothing to do with the price of that. And the zips on there have nothing to do with it. Yes, they do have their own value somewhere in society, but they haven't agreed upon it. So you can't take that £100 and split it and say, right, the handle costs this much and the zip costs this much. You can't do that. Does that make sense? So let's say if he goes and buys that bag, takes it home, and then he goes, wait a minute. He says, this bag, right, is, I thought this bag was going to be something that was going to fit my laptop. It doesn't fit my laptop. Is that genuine reason for why he can return that bag? No, it's not.
No.
It's not.
Doesn't have a defect.
That was his fault. That's not a defect in the bag. That's not a defect in the bag. Does that make sense? So, sorry. He does not have the right to reduce the price. Get my words right. So he doesn't have the right to reimburse a partial, refund. He can't get a partial refund for that. So he can't go back to Ikram and say, I paid you £100, I want £10 back because my laptop don't fit in here. He can't do that. So what happens then? So because he didn't find it as he wanted, this goes into something called khiyar ru'ya. When you buy something and you take it home and you look at it and it doesn't work out how you wanted it, it doesn't fulfill the specs, like we say in the description, you have the right to return that thing. Does that make sense? You can't get a partial refund unless, you can only get a partial refund if when you are buying it, like he said, this bag, because it fits your laptop, the price is going to be this much. If it doesn't fit your laptop, the price is going to be this much. Yeah, so now if it didn't fit his laptop, then obviously that would reduce the price. Does that make sense? So the example they give here is of a slave. So Shakil buys a slave. When he buys a slave, he assumed when he bought the slave, this slave is going to be a chef, a cook, or someone who's a scribe, a writer, someone who's skilled in a certain area. But because when he bought it, there was no value on that particular skill, he can't reduce the price. He can't go back to him and say, I want some money back.
What about returning? Although he can't reduce the
Yeah, he can return it.
He can return it. What about the how much does he pay?
No, he can return the whole item and he gets whole full money back guarantee.
Oh, I see. Within the 3 days, exactly.
No, that's any time.
Anytime.
Because it's got nothing to do with 3 days, masala. This has got to do with khiyar ru'ya, it's going to come next.
But does he have to have specified in advance or made it known to the buyer that he's buying it to fit his laptop?
No. Like, look, let me give you an example. It's going to come, the whole chapter is going to come khiyar. That's what I'm saying. This masala should have been appropriately mentioned over there. If you buy something, like online, and it comes to your house and you open it, and it's not the thing that you expected it to be. On there, the way it showed it's going to be bigger. And when you bought it, it's like a small little thing. Right? Because you didn't find it as you expected it, you can return it. This is called khiyar ru'ya.
Sorry. In the case of a bag, he's seen what he's buying.
Yeah.
He knows the color of it, he knows the size of it. On those bases, can he return it?
No, because when he bought that bag, what happened was he made the agreement with him that he was going to buy this bag because of.
Oh, so that the option has been agreed. That's what I'm trying to say. As long as the option.
So this is what he did. When he bought it, but because he hadn't stipulated that if it fits your laptop, it's going to be this much value. He didn't give it a value. He can't reduce it.
No, but two Muslims.
So can you sell someone a commodity, just say like you're selling someone a car and not offer them the option of giving it back within 3 days? Are you allowed to do that exactly? Just say you want to sell something to somebody.
Yeah.
And you don't give them the option of returning
That's
it.
fine then. That's between you and him. He said, look, I don't want you to have that option.
You don't offer the refund.
He says, fine, I'm not going to buy it then. That's fine.
Sorry, going back to that masla. So I go to Mawlid Ikram, I see his bag, I say, look, I'm going to buy that bag, and I leave. I don't tell him anything about my laptop. I go home, doesn't fit.
What did he say to you when you bought that bag? What description did he give to you? No description.
No, I saw the bag. I went to his
And
shop.
you just bought it?
I just bought it.
Okay, no, then you can't give it back.
That's what I.
Then you can't give it back. No.
Right. Yeah.
But this is like I said in the beginning.
That was my point.
This is the description, the black color and all those things. He didn't stipulate a price for these things.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So the same thing with the slave. So man ba abdan, whoever sells a slave, ala annahu, that assuming that he was, because the way he was selling it, he was making it out that this guy's a chef. He didn't say he's a chef, but he was assuming that this was a chef that he was buying.
Yeah. So if I go and Muhammad Ikram says to him, he's got to sign up or he communicates, I've got this laptop bag, it fits all Apple laptops.
Yes.
I don't tell him I have an Apple laptop, but I buy that and I go home and it doesn't fit my Apple.
Give it back.
Then I can give it back. But if I go and I like the bag, I just take it and don't tell him anything, he hasn't represented anything.
No.
I can't give it back because the risk is on me then.
That's it. O katibun, or he's a scribe, فَوَجَدَهُ بِخِلَافِ ذَلِكَ. So remember, when he bought it, he understood from the sale that this was going to be a chef, this was going to be a scribe. فَوَجَدَهُ بِخِلَافِ ذَلِكَ, and he found it opposed to that, or in contrast to that. فَالْمُشْتَرِ بِالْخِيَارِ إِنْ شَاءَ أَخَذَهُ بِجَمِيعِ الثَّمَنِ, because he wasn't happy, mutually happy, that rida, that taradi wasn't there, he can take it or he can leave it. He's got a choice. So if there's an argument, for example, he goes back and he says to him, look, you said to me that this bag is going to fit the laptops. You said this is a laptop bag. You said it. And I went home, it's not my laptop bag. Right? I'm not happy with it. And it becomes an argument, it'll go to court. And if it goes to court in that case, then what will happen is, then Bayna al-Mudda'i, the person who's making the claim, who's making a claim? He's making a claim. He'd have to provide evidence. You show me proof, show me a receipt where it said, this is a laptop bag. Show me something goes, bring 2 witnesses that saw this, him saying it. If you can't provide evidence, he's going to ask Ikram to swear an oath. Swear an oath that you didn't say this. I swear an oath that I didn't say it. And he wins the case. Does that make sense?
So going back to the death, so